Okay, so welcome everyone to our special event and professional development session with Quita Keller with Chemonics. So welcome, Quita. Thanks for joining us and taking the time out to have this discussion with us on intentional, impactful networking. Show up ready, stay engaged, and make positive and powerful impressions. So, Quita, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Will. I am thrilled to be here and to have this opportunity. I am the Talent Engagement Senior Specialist at Chemonics International. And so my role is all about networking. And you would think it's something that I have always loved, but that's not true. And it's something that I always encourage people to do. And so I want to talk about how people can make it their own and make it meaningful and all the things that you just said. So thank you so much for having me.
Of course, when you came up with the idea for the topic, I thought it was perfect for all of the folks that will be attending our conference. So this is a great way for us to kick off our professional development sessions with the topic of networking. So let's start with that right there. So with that topic, what is your definition or description of networking for our attendees?
Yeah, I love that question because to be honest, I think many of us, I'm going to include myself in that, have kind of an ick feeling. There's an ick factor, a discomfort or nervousness around networking. And so for me, I like to think about it as community building, right? As thinking about, what I have to offer to or in a community and what might be missing in my community set and how I can sort of bolster that and just applying it to a professional or maybe if people are going back to school in academic context. So it's really just about reaching out to people, getting to know people, and showing up with what you have to offer and also your questions. I think that one of the things that makes some people, myself included, again, uncomfortable with networking sometimes is it feels like you are just asking, taking, grubbing, however you want to call it. But the reality is that, whoever you are, wherever you are in your career, in your life, there is something that you do have to offer. And, doing this kind of connecting with others gives you the chance to actually see what it is that you bring to the table, as well as what else might be at that table for you to enjoy. So that's kind of how I see it as an exchange and as building something.
Awesome, awesome. I agree 100%. So that kind of leads into, some of the points why networking is so important because a lot of people hear, no, you need to build your network, you need to build your network, but they don't realize why. Why is networking so important to your career, to your future? So if you can give us some insight on why you believe networking is important.
Absolutely. I mean, in my role, as I shared, as talent engagement senior specialist for Chemonics, and collaborating with many of the recruiters and also hiring managers, and having insight into the system when people apply, I know that people are all given full and fair consideration, and it also really helps when someone can vouch for you or when someone can give you a heads up that there's an opportunity that's coming down the line, and so to get ready, it's not out there yet. Kind of like I think in real estate they call those pocket listings. The same is true for jobs. And so building your network, like building a community, allows you to maybe see what some of your blind spots are as well. Like when you build a network and engage with people, they may ask you questions you're not really prepared for. Well, you'll be prepared next time, right? Or in that moment, you can ask questions and learn. So, it provides you with access to things you might not have otherwise had access to. And I think oftentimes the reality for many people, underrepresented people, people of color, women of color, that our networks aren't as broad as they actually could and should be. And I think that whole idea of recognizing that not only do we deserve to have that kind of access, but we it's almost like a right, and it's something that we should embrace and pursue. And so getting that comfort with networking or community building outside of your comfort zone. That's part of it too, right? Is that it allows you to stretch and grow. And so that's, there's so many things about it that are important. I think for me, it's a lot about not just mindset, but a shift in how you think about it and how you approach it. And again, to what I said a little bit earlier, allowing yourself to see that you have something you can bring to it as well as something to get from it. And so it's not, you don't have to necessarily network in the spaces where this is what I want and I'm going for it. Sometimes building that network is to explore, right?
Yeah.
And because you don't have any idea whatsoever, that's actually great. That's fine too. It's sort of doing research or reconnaissance, right? It's like, what can I learn that will help me decide, no, this is not for me, or yes,
Right.
it is. And I guess the last thing I will say about that, or to answer that question, is that, even though, and I'll speak for me, but I know there are others like me, networking can make us nervous or uncomfortable because somehow it feels like the stakes are high. I'm just going to give the example of the career event, right? It's like, you don't know many of these people, if any of them. They don't know you. The stakes
Right.
aren't as high as you might think. It's a really
Right.
great time to practice,
Have everything
right?
to gain. Yeah.
And it's sort of like if something, falls flat or lands hard, it's like, oh, okay, well, that didn't work with this person, or maybe I need to revisit that. But it's a really great way to practice and explore with relatively low risk, right?
Yeah.
Especially in a context where you don't know a lot of people. But I think networking, and we'll get to that a bit later, in places where you do know people is equally important because you never, ever, ever know who knows what or whom. And I think a lot of assumptions behind networking is like, oh, that person doesn't know any, that person can't help me. It's like, well, that's kind of how you were thinking of yourself. You can help somebody, and someone you thought couldn't probably could. You just have to be open-minded and sort of, open-spirited around it.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. So I think that's awesome insight. One of the concepts that I have when networking is when I meet someone new and I'm looking to expand my network, I always lead with the idea of how can I help this person? So, what information can I ask them about who they are, what they do, uh, to see how that connects with things that I know how to do, to see how I can help someone. So, in your you know opinion or in your position, how can anyone begin establishing a personal and professional practice of networking and refine their approach over time?
First of all, I love that approach that you just shared, Will, and I think that's a great way in, right? Is to do a bit of reflection before you step into that space of community building or networking, right? And I think sometimes for us, if we're not clear about what it is we might have to offer, the best people to ask are the people who know you best, right? Or things that you hear a lot about yourself that you might not feel comfortable accepting as a compliment, but it's like, Will, you do this really well. It's like, oh, come on. It's like, no, you do. So that's something you think about leading with. And I think the other piece is to start, where we are, right? It's sort of where are you living? Where did you just finish going to school? What are some of the things that you actually do enjoy? Because I think a lot of times people say this about relationships, right? If you're trying to find a mate, a spouse, a date, is to do the things that you enjoy, right? Because that takes a little bit of the pressure off. And I think the same can be true for networking in a professional context, right? It's like, what are some of the things that attract you, or that you're attracted to, or you think you might like to do? It doesn't always have to be at a career event. There are people who have jobs all kinds of places. Like I always, will joke, but it's like sometimes in the grocery store line, and that's a pretty low stakes, environment, is that you chat up people. That's a great way to practice in places that you already go. If it's a sporting event, or while you're waiting in line for anything, or going to, sometimes lectures, especially free ones. I love those, things that you might not necessarily have done, but you set an intention, right? And I'm going to go here and see if I can meet one new person and
Yeah.
share an interest that I have. Because another thing that gets a kind of a bad rep, I think, because we use it a lot, but is this sort of elevator speech. But you do kind of want to have that ready. That's another thing that you bring to networking. You know yourself better than
Right.
anybody else.
Right.
You are
Right.
the expert on you. That is
Right.
your subject matter expertise is you. And so you can, without being, I think, deceptive, deceiving, you can present the very best of you, right? You know what you are comfortable with, do well, put that forward. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Right. And so yeah, so this is an opportunity to do that. So I think some of, being ready to network or community build is being self-aware, like reflecting on the things that you do well. And sometimes it's being, a good listener, believe it or not, right? I
Sure.
mean, one of the things about reaching out to people, whether it's on LinkedIn or to follow up, is that people, almost anybody, they love to talk about themselves,
Yes.
and they love when people are interested in what they do. And so find that thing that feels genuine to you. Because that's the other thing I mentioned earlier, the ick factor. It's like, don't be fake because you'll land someplace you don't want to be. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. Right.
Be
Right.
yourself
Yes.
because unless you're yourself, you'll be having to do that job, that work as whoever you presented yourself
Yes.
as. You know what I mean?
That's an awesome point.
Yeah.
Awesome
So
takeaway.
anyway,
So, do you have any specific thoughts? Um, I know not everyone watching this will be an HBCU grad or HBCU student, but with us being HBCU Connect, the vast majority of folks have some HBCU tie-in, whether it's undergrad or grad school. So, do you have any specific thoughts about networking for HBCU grads?
that is a great question too. And I just love the name of your organization, which is HBCU Connect, right? And it's, I think, to me, about staying connected,
Yes.
and about whatever organizations. Not everyone who went to an HBCU, my parents included, were members of, fraternities and sororities or any of those things. But there's something that you did when you were there, and there are some people you have stayed in contact with. And I think that whatever institution of, higher learning people went to, like you said, whether it's undergrad or graduate school, I think staying connected, right? And, through the alumni association, going back to volunteer, like going back to give back, because that's another example, right, of what do you have to offer. Believe me, our universities all hit us up all the time because
Yeah.
they
Oh
need
yeah.
us,
Oh yeah.
but that's a two-way street, really. You're giving your time and sometimes your money, but you're also showing up, and there are others there too. And that's an opportunity to network. It's how we use that word, right? But it's building community. And then, it's going to get a little bit Northern California. That's where I spent a lot of my young adulthood. But it's like putting it out there in the universe and manifesting it, right? And so telling people not only what you're about, but kind of what you're looking for. It's like,
Right.
we all say it in different ways, but it's like put it out there. Right. And so I think that, showing up at we went to the schools we went to because there was some affinity for it, and especially if we graduated from there, we stayed long enough for that to grow. And so to not lose that, right, to go back to that in some capacity and, continue or develop those relationships. And I know sometimes, like, faculty, they are
Oh yeah.
thrilled. They're shocked and thrilled, and it's sad they're shocked, right? But to hear from students,
Oh
it's
yeah.
like they wonder what happened to you, and here you show up and you tell them, right? And so that this is a side note too, I think, in terms of going back and giving back, is to not only show up when you need something, right?
Right. Oh yeah.
But to just check in on others as well. It's like, oh, I remember you were developing this course back when I was here. Whatever happened with that? Did that get off the ground? Or, you had this one course and it always felt like it could unfold into a book. And I think those kinds of things where you've spent a little time not just to think about, what you might have to offer, but what that other person does have to offer,
Right.
because sometimes they're not quite sure. So I think that there's a really special community that exists in HBCUs, and not just your own, right,
Mm.
but kind of across. It's
Yes.
a very large community, again, with HBCU Connect. And so I think, and it's like, wearing your colors and all that other stuff. It's people come up to you, people will say things, people will engage you, and conversations unfold. And so I think it's always just being open to it and being ready for it, and not feeling like you have to make something more of it than whatever it ends up being. It's not a failure if you don't walk away with a job offer from
Right,
every
right,
connection, because that
right,
might be two people away or
right,
2 months away. You
right,
just don't know where that is going to sort of come from, back to you from
for
having
sure.
stepped out into that space openly.
I think this is very timely advice because we're in the thick of homecoming season as well. Like my homecoming for Hampton University is Friday, and there's almost no better environment to network than with like classmates from the same college and in an environment where everybody's happy to go back. I remember last year when I went to homecoming. I mean, everyone that I said hello to or anything was just welcome to network. So this advice is super timely. So we appreciate you sharing. Okay,
I,
so
I'm sorry. I just have to speak to that too, Will, because
go
you're
for it.
really
Go
throwing
for it.
out some great pearls. I think, people who came up with us and cared about us, they actually want to see us do good,
Yeah,
because when we do good, they're doing good too by association, right? And so
100%.
it is. It's like, and that's back to the point I was trying to make of kind of start where you are at homecoming, right? And that is not the ick factor. It's like we're here to have fun. We're here to celebrate. It's family. It's all these things, and people got jobs, so talk to them, and
Yeah,
connections, and they
yeah,
will open those up to us. So
absolutely. Okay, so let's pivot a little bit to, so some folks can network in person, but then sometimes there's opportunities to network online or virtually. For example, at this event that we're hosting right now. So, what strategies can help people stay engaged and memorable when networking online, where face-to-face contact is limited?
I mean, that's the world we live in now, right? Is sort of hybrid, and sometimes I think, um, for people, and I may not come off as being shy, but I do have some seriously shy tendencies to me. Sometimes there's a bit more comfort when you're doing things virtually. You do have the option to be on or off camera, and I always do recommend trying to get yourself ready to be on camera, because that is one thing that's memorable. People, who have the ability to see, when they see you, there's almost like, even though you and I are virtual, I'm looking you in the eye. Do you know
Right.
what I mean? And so people see that, and it's just, there's something, a bit of warmth that comes through with that.
Yes.
I don't know if people viewing this will have the opportunity to do this, but oftentimes I would say, if they can't do it for this event, for future events, is that, come prepared, right? It's not an exam, but at the same time, I think you kind of don't want to say, well, what do you do again?
Right.
It's sort of
Right.
that. Questions are great, and we love questions in the booth, but at least have a general idea of the space that the people, are at a booth or hosting the event are in, so that you can enter that conversation with thoughtful questions. You don't have to know all the answers. And the flip side of that, which I think a lot of recruiters don't like, is that stump the chump, right? Where you've done all the homework and you know more about the organization than they do. That's not the goal. But I think, being on camera, being really present, and also, even though I had said before, you don't have to know exactly what you want to do, but have an idea of what you might want to do.
Right.
And
Right.
even if your early career, you might not have had a full-time permanent job yet. That's okay. What did you study? And
Right.
why did you study that? What did you think it might lead to? That's a really interesting place to start.
Right.
And I will say, I mean, I think that there are two things. If your early career, what can often be exciting when you're talking to people who've been out of school for a while is what you studied, believe it or not, right? And so, and most schools worth their salt, they're talking to you about the value of what you're studying in the real world. So to bring that conversation,
For sure.
if you're someone mid-career and pivoting, talk about the pivot, embrace that. There's no shame in it. I've had a million different careers, right? And that's how you learn. And I think what people often like there is, what can you bring from another sector into our sector? because that's where innovation happens, is that you take something that worked somewhere else that's brand new to this sector,
Hmm.
right? So there, opportunities for that kind of excitement. And there's not always a lot of time. And so to be ready with your questions and
Right.
to also ask really quickly, have like your LinkedIn profile, have it copied and ready to drop in a chat and say, I would love to connect with you. Would you
A good
mind?
one.
You
Love that.
know?
Love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's crucial. Like having their LinkedIn profile ready, having their questions ready, having in mind that you might not have a long period of time to chat it up because there could be other people that are waiting. So love those tips and hints for our candidates. So here's another one that I think is a good question, and that is, what common mistakes do job seekers make when networking with employers, and how can they avoid them?
So there are quite a few. I think a lot of us have made them. And the first one that comes to mind for me is either multitasking or somehow otherwise being distracted because something better has somehow come up. It leaves a really bad impression. And I think sometimes people might think it's not obvious. It is obvious when you're
Right,
not paying attention to
right,
me. It's
right.
obvious when you're not present. And so here's the thing that is different. Like sometimes people have said, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, it's my child. It's cool. Oh, I'm sorry, it's my pet. It's my whatever. Oh, that's cool. No, I get you. Do what you need to do. Or do you want to come back? I'm completely open to that. But when you're doing something else, because a lot of these platforms, people can, it's like, ooh, someone better is pinging me
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
It's sort of,
yeah.
no, you've made your choice. Be where you are, be present. So a big mistake people make is not being present and either not caring that
Good
the
one.
other person can see that or
Mhm.
not recognizing that you're coming off as super distracted. So it's like respect that other person's time if you want them to respect yours. That's a huge one to me. And then one more really quickly, if there's time,
Yeah, for sure.
is that I mentioned the bit about if time allows to try and learn just one little something about the company so you know who you're speaking with, right? So you don't have to memorize things. It's just sort of look at the website, familiarize yourself. And I
Right.
know that all of us had the opportunity, maybe that's what I'll say. All of us
Mhm.
who are in booths had the opportunity to upload some materials. Go
Right.
to the website before you try to talk to anybody. That's
That's good.
I think that's a really good tip because then you come kind of ready. And also you can look and say, oh yeah, no, that's not really, I'm not even
Right.
slightly
Rather than
interested.
having the
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, exactly.
That's a really good one.
So
Appreciate it. So what are effective ways to follow up with employers after that initial networking, right? So I imagine we're going to have, thousands of folks come through and hundreds of people, going to different booths and things. So you've had the conversation with a company, right? What do you recommend they do? And they've networked and introduced themselves and share their LinkedIn. What do you recommend they do for follow up?
that is such a great question because you don't want to drop the ball, right? And it is your job to follow up. And so I will say here right now that I am the only Kita, it's Quita Keller at Chemonics. And so if you've been to the event and my colleagues haven't shared their LinkedIn profile, which I'm sure they will, I just shared mine. So go find me and let me know you went and you're interested in Chemonics. I mean, so whomever you connect with, try and virtually try and connect with them on LinkedIn. People don't appreciate the power of LinkedIn. It's a really great way. And to say a little something, like in my case, you'd say that you saw this video, but in the case of, meeting one of my colleagues, you try and remember something about them or about their role or something they said to you. So that's one thing. The other thing I would say is that it's really valuable to follow companies on LinkedIn or the company itself, not to just connect with the person, or other social media platforms like, Facebook. I don't know how much people use anymore, or like Instagram, right? And also, some of us have like a YouTube presence, and that's just more information. We have a newsletter. A lot of our events are actually virtual now or hybrid, and they're free, right? And so a chance to get to learn more about, the company that way. And also, I think a way of following up is because people are always busy. In the nature of my role, I'm really responsive. So it's not any like shade or dissing or anything. Sometimes people don't even check their LinkedIn. Like I have friends, I'm like, excuse me that you have not connected with me. They're like, I didn't even see it. I'm like, really? So just to keep at it, and also to move on. It's like, okay, you tried Chemonics, now just keep going with all the people, and have, no one's going to know the difference. Have kind of a little standard pat message, and say, hey, we met at such and such, and I would love to stay connected. So I think using the same sort of tools that you had, like you met on a virtual platform, follow through with all the virtual options. And if they connect with you, then you can ask if they don't have time to meet with you for like a brief, and that means 15 to 20 minutes max, informational interview. Is there anyone you might recommend? you know and I would say, I'm sorry, last thing, I would say start small, because like, for example, people, and I don't blame anyone. It's like, okay, go for it, but we'll have big asks for like a short connection, like reviewing someone's resume or something like that. Like, could you have a look at, it's like, no, you need to decide what you're interested in. I'm not going to review your resume and tell you what you should apply for. So it's like kind of calibrating the ask in relation to the connection that you made. You might build up to that, because I certainly do that with people whom I've met over time, and the relationship is there. So it's like recognizing what level the relationship is at, and then trying to grow it, right? Instead of like diving right in, it's like, can I come over? It's like, really? No.
Love that one. Especially, the advice about following up on LinkedIn, because I think in the role as a recruiter at a company, that's almost a standard thing to do. But with if you have that opportunity to connect with someone like at a booth, I don't think it's a bad thing to ask how they might like for you to follow up as well. Just in case someone is okay. Let's say they're talking to you and they really like your experience, and they have an idea where you might be a fit, and they want you to email them. So they might tell you, you know what, I almost forgot, here's my email address. Send me your resume and remind me of this conversation, and follow up with me via email. So if they ever offer that information, I think that's a plus as well.
100%. And I'm so glad you said that. It's really true. I mean, people, I'm sharing what is actually what I prefer most and what we do a lot in my company, but you're absolutely right. It's to not make any assumptions in any direction, right? They might be super into you and just like kind of waiting for you to say, do you want my email? Or,
Right, right.
so that's a really great point, Will. I like that.
Okay, so how can job seekers make their skills and values stand out in virtual conversations with recruiters? Because it's one thing if you're in person, you've got your resume in hand, you're having a conversation, they're looking over your resume in real time, and they see something on your resume and that stands out. But in a virtual environment, it might not be as easy as just looking at your resume in real time. So, do you have any advice for job seekers that want to stand out in a conversation while they're networking with employers virtually?
I do, and it's that, dreaded elevator pitch, or, and I think it's having a few ready, right? Like, we're not a tech firm, but there are certain, points that you want to highlight if we are. As a sustainable development firm, right? If you just even look at our website, you'll know that innovation, critical thinking, maybe project management, right? Think of those keywords, whatever they might, like buzzwords for an organization, and be ready with 3 points that relate to you. It's like, this is, how I approach things that are new, or this is, I'm inquisitive. I mean, some things are really basic that people just don't say, but that really, it's like, oh, we want someone who is, maybe not dedicated. I'm not sure if that's the language you want to use, but something that conveys that, right? Or, honestly, hardworking, right? In your own language in a way. Those are basic like qualities that people want. And so to be prepared to spit those out to anyone and make little tweaks as you speak with different, organizations. And so sometimes, it's letting them say a little bit before you, launch into that, or before, maybe you ask a little bit about what they are seeking that doesn't show up in the job postings. Like ask for some of the behind the scenes information so that you can speak to that. And so you ask and they say, "Oh, well, innovation is really important." And you can say, "Well, that's wonderful to hear because that's something that's exciting and important to me and that's what keeps me engaged in an organization," or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But that you get a little information, and then, on knowing yourself, subject matter expert on you,
Yep.
that you throw that elevator speech down in a way that, the more you do it, the more you practice in these low stakes environments, the better you're going to get at it, until finally it's like, "Oh, wow, okay, we want you."
Right, right,
you
right.
know
Awesome. Okay, so we haven't really asked a whole lot about Chemonics. I know Chemonics has a booth with us in the career fair. But anything you want to tell us about Chemonics or your presence here at our event?
Well, first, I want to say we're so excited to have this opportunity to be at the event, and we hope that it will be the beginning of a relationship with HBCU Connect. Chemonics is an employee-owned sustainable development firm. So we have international development projects around the globe. And so we are committed, our mission is to having meaningful impact around the world, helping people to live healthier, more productive lives. And we do that by partnering with the people who live in the places where our projects exist. And that's something we're very proud of. So globally, we have about 6,000 experts. And for many of the people who will be attending this event, they will probably either be interested in a remote US opportunity or a Washington, D.C. based opportunity. That's where our headquarters are in the US, and then there are headquarters in the UK. And as I said, projects globally. And so, there are some people who have maybe technical expertise, in water and natural resources, or some kind of environmental background, or agriculture, or education, or supply chain, or global health. I mean, when you think about what our mission is, it really spans, right? But the other side of that is that we want people who are generalists too, right? So even though my, master's training is in public health, and like all of my training, I'm not applying directly in my role, right? And so what we always say is we are looking for people who want to make a difference in the lives of others around the world. That's who
Awesome.
we want. And so it's that we're mission driven. We want you to be as well. And then, we look at all the rest. So,
Awesome.
really quickly, so please go to our booth. The other thing that I recommend to everyone, and it's not just for our company, set up one or more job alerts,
Oh
because,
yeah.
you know, if you're like I used to be before I knew this in this job, you were waiting until 11:59 on the deadline to submit that application. No, by then they've already been moving through the
You've been doing
process,
right, yeah.
and that you're not going to knock somebody out. They're not even going to look at you. So be ready. That's kind of the theme here, right? Is always be ready, even with applying. And so the job alerts help you to see trends of what types of roles we hire for, but also notify you so that you can apply within the first 1 to 3 days. And yeah, go to the booth, look at our materials, our website, and then go chat with some amazing colleagues who are going to be there.
Awesome. So, Keita, let me thank you for taking the time out to share your insight, your experience on the topic of networking, being intentional and impactful. We appreciate it. To all of our attendees that are watching this session, definitely go check out Chemonics and their booth. Have a conversation. Take a look at uh, the details on their website, the materials that they've uploaded, and reach out to the recruiters and explore a fit with Chemonics. So, Keita, thank you again, and we really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Will.
for sure.